students, today I have with me Mr. Waleed Aly. Waleed is a journalist, he's a musician, he's an academic, he's a cricket tragic, and tragically he's also a Richmond supporter. But I guess just as importantly, he's also a lawyer. So thanks for joining us, Waleed.
Thanks for having me.
So can you tell me about your journey from law to journalism? Was it accidental or was it deliberate?
Yeah, total accident. I was working, so when I left law school, I'd applied for a job as a cadet at the age, and I'd also applied for legal jobs. And I got through to the exam at the age, and it was on grand final day, so I didn't want to take it. And also the legal job, I was a legal associate to Justice Kay in the family court, and that job got offered to me. And so I looked at it and I thought, well, the chances of me getting the cadetship, there are about 1 million people who'll be going for this. They'll give the job to 5 or something. I've already got this legal job, I'll go with that. And so to me, that's what I was going to do for the rest of my life, was be a lawyer. I hadn't imagined it would become anything else. And from there I was in commercial law, I was at Maddox. I probably worked for you actually quite a bit, because it was the state government was my main client. So, although probably not your department, but anyway, so that's what I was doing. And at that time, I mean, this was early 2000s, so it was just after the 9/11 era, the Bali bombings, the London bombings, so I ended up writing a lot of stuff in the press, and it was out of that other things grew. So Monash University had been reading my stuff in that. They clearly thought there was some academic merit to that and asked me if I wanted to come on board with them, so I went and did that. At the same time, just kind of writing this stuff, and so a media activity kind of just happened that way. And the odd bit of broadcast followed as a result of that. And then the next thing I knew, I was working in media. So I don't consider myself a journalist, because to me a journalist does reports, and you know, mine grew out of commentary. And so I guess that's kind of how it all happened.
Okay, so from studying law to initially practicing law, what extra skills do you need apart from what you learn in the law books?
Well, I think what media is all about is how to present knowledge you have. The knowledge that you have in media is not necessarily terribly deep, but the difference between someone who can broadcast and someone who can't is that they can convey what knowledge they have, however limited that is. That's really all it is. The legal part of my training, though, I think was utterly indispensable to what I did later, because that was what honed my analytical skills. That's what taught me how to identify an argument, assess it really rapidly, and ask the next question that might expose the weakness in whatever it is that's coming at me. And so the broadcast I ended up doing was at the ABC, initially on radio. And it was, it was things like filling in John Fane's slot or whatever, where you are doing a lot of accountability interviewing, sometimes over quite a long period of time, 10 minutes or whatever, which in media terms is forever. So that sort of interrogative style, law was just indispensable for that.
What about the language, though? I mean, the language of the law, language that a lot of lawyers use, the average punter just doesn't understand it. How can we make the language more simpler?
I had to lose the Latin. Do you know what? I think in my case I went through my own evolution with that. Like, occasionally I'll go back and look at an article I wrote 10 years ago, and I can see the lawyer there. I can sort of see the language. There's a lot of in respect of and that sort of stuff. And now I look at it as, once you move to broadcast, everything has to be snappier. And so now I look at it and go, gee, and I look at what I write now, and it's just much more colloquial. But I think what happens is, as the concepts you're dealing with actually become ingrained, so that you just understand them, they become more or less instinctive, you need to rely on the jargon less. It's one of these weird things that I think you learn once you have to step out of the bubble of your profession, whether it's law or academia or whatever it is, and you have to speak to non-experts about it. You actually begin to, it challenges how well you understand a concept. And then the ability to move beyond the jargon flows from the fact that you've mastered is probably a bit strong, but that you have a really strong grasp. of what it is that you're doing. So in my case, there will be times administrative law principles will come up in the course of an interview that I'm doing. Maybe it's judicial review, for example. I understand what judicial review is because I had to sit through a whole lot of boring con and admin classes at uni. And I got the concept of the difference between judicial review and merits review. But I know that the audience that I'm speaking to has not had the benefit of those classes, and if I started talking in those terms, I'd probably be bored. So you start to think of analogous ways of explaining it. They're going through a checklist to make sure you got the process right, that you actually followed the law in making the decision. You didn't just, make it all up or whatever it is. Now, that's not the kind of precision you would expect in the High Court, but it conveys the concept in a way that non-lawyers will be able to access. But without that legal grounding, I could not have done it because you can't access the concepts well enough to unlock the meaning for other people. And I guess when you're in a field of expertise, which the law is, or academia is, just be really careful sometimes that what you're not doing is just hiding behind the jargon. You can actually disguise that you don't understand something that well because you know what words to put around it.
Well, absolutely. But talking about, I guess, describing concepts, I mean, you're pretty passionate about human rights. There's a lot of students who will be watching this who are passionate about human rights issues and social justice issues and the like, but they're poring over their law books and they're reading about contract and judicial review and the like. How do you actually put those very noble concepts that our students are passionate about into everyday language where they're understood better by everyday people?
It's hard to answer that because I don't know that I've mastered that. I don't know that I've got how you do it. I know though that in each particular case you can find an avenue to do it. And it's not the same avenue every time. Sometimes it's through a story that illustrates a concept. Sometimes it's through a hypothetical. Or it's an analogy that you'd want to draw on, right? Oddly, you can use, I use legal analogies for things sometimes. So when I talk about as a sociologist, when I talk about concepts of political alienation, for example, people understand the idea that when you feel like you're being accused of something, it's a great relief to be able to have your day in court, right? People get that concept. They can understand the concept of being accused of something but not being able to tell a judge about it. And so I can take that, which is I suppose a legal concept of natural justice, and I can take that and apply it to something that's not legal at all but it's more sociological. It actually works both ways. But really all you're trying to do, I suppose the art of communicating something that's dry and complex and abstract to an audience that isn't used to that conversation or doesn't have those terms of art is really just to do it through analogy and story.
And you have no regrets about doing law?
No, God no. No. Like, doing a law degree, and I'm not just saying this because there's a contrived interview situation here. Doing a law degree was the best decision I made because I honestly think if I had not done a law degree, I don't think I could have done anything that flowed from it. Now, it's a counterfactual. Maybe if I'd never done a law degree, I would have ended up with a different set of skills that would have meant I ended up in the same position doing it in a different sort of a way. I don't know. But I find it, I'm pretty convinced that the reason I was able to enter media at a high level pretty quickly, like my first ever shift on radio on air by myself was the morning shift on 774. Like I didn't come through 3CR and Triple R and all, which is the
straight
normal
to the top,
path.
straight to the top.
Kind of, yeah. But scandalously so. Like to the extent that I told them, you are crazy, you should not be doing this. Yeah. And it took about a year or two for them to convince me that it was worth doing. But I think the reason I was able to do that, and that so far at least it's worked out okay, is that I am not the press gallery journalist. Yeah. I'm not the person who spent my time at uni learning how to edit things or learning how to speak in the way that reporters are meant to speak. I didn't do those things. I don't actually know those things. You put me up against a journalism graduate and they're going to talk a whole lot of stuff that I just have no grasp of, nothing except an intuitive grasp of it. But I think it was that to every media situation, I was always something else. That's actually what gave me the advantage. And in fact, in every situation. So in my academic work, I'm the guy who communicates to a mass audience and gets the media side of things. in my media work, I'm the guy who's got technical legal training and it has an academic background.
They complement each other,
So,
basically.
yeah, but what it means is I end up being a package that's not the same as...
Yeah.
I've always got a weapon. Even if I'm not very good at using that weapon, it's always... There's a dimension I can kind of draw on. And without the legal side of it, without the law degree, that just simply wouldn't have happened.
So, if you had one piece of advice for our students, because they're all watching this, and
are they? Is this like,
oh yes, no.
This is set rating.
This is the highest rating locally produced RMIT legal show.
Really?
Yeah, at RMIT.
Yeah, right.
What
it's
would
a vast field, prestigious award. Yeah.
What would that one piece of advice be?
Well, I think it depends on what they want to do with it. But my advice, generally, and this applies especially in law, is to grasp big concepts. If you can get your head around big concepts, that is so intellectually powerful because it means you can encounter indefinite number of factual scenarios and have an analytical window. And it may not be the best analytical window or whatever, but it's something, right? And so I know when and this happened all the time, especially in radio, I'd get a call, or the producer would get a call and they'd say, oh, you've got the treasurer right now. And you've given zero thought to you don't even know what the story of the day is because if it's morning radio, the story hasn't broken, right? All you know is you have 5 minutes with the treasurer with zero preparation. You know that if you have one question, you now have at least the potential for a whole interview.
Bit like this.
Yeah, I suppose. because what you've got is a series of concepts in your intellectual background you can draw on to ask the next question or to interrogate the next thing. So for example, and this is not strictly a legal example, but this is what I've, just to illustrate the point of having a sort of a conceptual understanding of things. At Monash, I teach in the Global Terrorism Research Centre, and so I teach, or at least this year I've done it doing a different subject, but up until this year I was teaching a master subject that was really about big social and political theory applied to the case study of terrorism. But it's all about the relationship of identity politics and radical politics and globalisation and parochial identity movements and all this sort of stuff. That was one of the most powerful sets of ideas I've ever come across to help me understand the politics of climate change. I'm not an environmentalist. I don't have that background. I'm not an environmental scientist. I did a chemical engineering degree. I was still looking up CFC tables when I was doing chemical engineering. Like, that's not my background, but I had enough of an understanding of some of the big social and political ideas that could help me grasp this as a social and political phenomenon. And it's the same with the law. When you understand the difference between a line of reasoning that is prejudicial and not probative, for example, and you really get that concept, you can apply that to pop culture debates, you can apply that to political debates, you can apply that to social debates, and it allows you to find analytical positions that a subject matter obsessive wouldn't, or someone who's an advocate for a particular cause in relation to that topic wouldn't. And then it becomes interesting. So whether it's media or law or whatever it is, the stronger the grasp you have of those big abstract ideas, the more powerful I think you'll find your reservoir of knowledge than if you're just remembering facts.
Well, there you go, students. There's some great advice. Grasp those big concepts and the analysis will follow, and it can be used in any walk of life. And if you look at Waleed as an example, you too could ultimately use your law, become a media superstar. Thanks for joining us.
No worries, thank you.